Today's question is from Sheri from Hillsboro, Oregon. And Sheri writes, you have such mastery of chords, chord structure, and voicing. Do you have recommendations on how to take the understanding and knowledge of chord voicing and take it to the level of making it intuitive in your playing? All right, Sheri, you have officially asked the biggest question of them all. Chord voicings, chord structure, there's an infinite amount, and there are infinite ways to play chords and to voice chords. Talking about chords, I could talk about chords and chord voicings all day. So I'm going to try to show you a few of the things that are foundational things for me in voicing chords and how I play chords. So I've talked about this in other videos, but there's a technique I use, and I borrowed it from guitar players. I call it drop note voicing, and it's simply this. It's taking a triad. There's an F triad, right? And in this triad, there's my middle note, and that's the note I'm going to drop. I'm going to lose this note from here, and I'm going to put it here, right? So I've gone from, which is a fine sound, but the difference between this and that, to me, is really profound. That's a much more orchestral and evocative sound. So I use this technique everywhere when I play voicings. There's an F voicing. So the C's down here, A, right? C could be up here. I've dropped it down here, right? It immediately sounds richer. It sounds more like a string section, more like a voicing that a string section would play, right? And part of what makes that so effective is that I'm not doubling this voice, right? The minute you start doubling voices on piano, it gets thicker sounding, but you lose a certain clarity. You lose a certain ring to the voicing. So, right, that versus that. I'm not loading up on this A flat in the middle, right? So I'm just, in D flat, I'm just going parallel up the scale, or just going up the scale with these voicings that are drop tenths. So there's the first one, 1, 5, 10, right? The drop note is this D flat that's in the bass, right? There's an E flat minor, same, D flat over F, G flat, A flat, B flat minor, A flat, G flat. So just that simple three-note voicings is, to me, a beautiful and complete sound and a very emotional sound. So rather than, right? So this technique can be expanded upon so easily. Staying in F, there it is. There's the A from the F chord, F, A, C. Take that A, drop it an octave here, right? Now, if I add this E down the bottom, I've got an F major 7 chord, right? Put it over A. Now, all right, I've dropped that all the way down here. So this isn't something that you necessarily do strictly, but a great thing to do is to start practicing these voicings in all the keys, right? Right? And the object is the piano is such a visual instrument that you start seeing these shapes. You start seeing these shells, and what's missing from that chord? The D. And, what these voicings are oftentimes made up of are a tenth, right? A tenth with a fifth and maybe a sixth on the top. Some combination of that. There's almost always a tenth involved, and that's where that richness comes from, right? That sound, that 1-10 sound. So this technique it's not meant, it's not a rule that you necessarily need to adhere to strictly, but it's a foundation for creating voicings that I use all the time, nonstop. And so I think a great way to really as you say, to take this to a level of making it intuitive in your playing. What that means to me is you learn these types of voicings in all the keys and get comfortable to the extent to where you really see them on the piano, where you're seeing these shapes, where your eyes are going to, because the piano is such a visual instrument where you're seeing these, one, my eyes going to that. I look on a chart and I see a D flat chord. That's the first thing I'm going to play. I'm not going to play a chord like this with a bunch of doubled voices. I'm automatically going to, right? There's just a feeling to that. There's. So as you see, a lot of this, there are tenths involved. Tenth, right? That interval of a tenth, which is the 1 and the 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. There's that. Another 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? On the piano, there's something about the 10th interval that just does a trip. It rings, the overtones, it's what I want to hear on the piano. So because of that, I tend to voice like this, where I'm always looking for kind of a skeletal shape, a fifth or a sixth with a note missing in the middle that I can then drop an octave down. And it's a very personal thing. It's a lot about experimenting with your own sensibilities and finding the ways that particular technique works for you. But, drop voicing, right? So there's a G minor. I took that G and I dropped it down an octave, right? And then I move that D up to an E, suddenly I've got a C7 chord, right? And then if I move that down to the D again and move this to an F, I've got a B flat over F, move that down to there. So what I just did is, right? Beautiful little almost classical sounding thing that could have been played, which is fine, but, right? To me, a much more sort of unique and beautiful and pianistic sounding way to play the chords. So, all that stuff. 3, 1, 5. There's triad, D flat triad. Take the F, drop it down here. Right? So this concept, this technique of dropping a note, drop note voicings, take a triad, middle note, drop it down an octave, is foundational for me in how I play chords on the piano. Right? Right? All of those are simply triads with a middle note dropped down an octave. And whatever. That sounds kind of, I don't know, it sounds kind of goofy to me, whereas that really sounds like I know what I'm doing when I play it that way, right? Like that sounds like, wow, that's music. So it's 3 notes. That's 3 notes. So just there, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm adding a melody on the top, right? A little suspension. There's the same drop note, F. Put a B flat on the top, suspend it and resolve it. Another one, sharp 11, right? Right? There's 2, there's sort of 2. I'm sort of playing could either be a B minor 6 or a G minor 7 flat 5, but it's just a sound. Right? Another thing that's available within this is you drop that note, right? Drop it down here, and suddenly you've got this great 10th that you can do little parallel melodies in. Right? So I'm just walking up with my same drop note technique, but right? If I take that drop bottom note and parallel the top note, I have this beautiful melody in tenths that's just right there and accessible to you. And again, makes me really sound like I know what I'm doing. And that's the goal. Is here, you know, music, piano. It's all about it's about a sound that evokes a feeling, and you know, that's what you're going for. So, to me, there's a feeling to that, right? So just there I did drop note, A flat, drop to there, and then I went up to the dominant 7 on the A flat because I knew I was going to resolve to that. So that's just going up the circle of fourths, doing that same little trick. There's infinite ways to utilize this. So much of this, Sheri, is going to be about learning this in all the keys, if possible, and getting it under your fingers and getting it in your visual, the way you look at the keyboard, and then it's just experimenting. You're going to play it way different than I play it, and you're going to come up with a bunch of amazing ways to use this that I haven't even thought of, but that's the beauty of it. That's my 2 cents about voicings. I hope I've answered your question, and we'll see you soon.